Hello, party people. My name is Krista Keough, and you're listening to Granted, the podcast that puts the fun in funding. Today, we're in the studio with Gianna Lauren. She's an artist, music industry professional, and is described by the Coast as a bit of a mystery. Since her debut in 2010, she's released 3 records and several singles on the beloved label and management group Forward Music. Gianna is also a grant writer, so I'm really excited to talk to her more about that today too. Thank you for joining us today, Gianna.
Thank you for inviting me to be here.
So you and I, we don't know each other very well. And I find that so surprising because I feel like we've been in the music industry in Halifax for about the same time, like a decade. And so when I was reading a bit about you, I saw that the Coast describes you as a bit of a mystery. And so that really rang true to me too. So I really appreciate you being here because this is great.
Let's solve this mystery.
It'd be great to get to know you a bit more. So what I know about you from your website was that you call Edmonton, Ottawa, and Halifax your homes. So can you tell me about that, why those places are so special to you?
I grew up in Edmonton.
Okay.
Lived there till I was 16.
Yeah.
And then halfway through high school, my father's job transferred us to Ottawa. Oh. And Ottawa became my second home. And lived there for quite a few years with the times in university and the was where I started music actually in Ottawa. There was a really sweet little scene going on there at the time. But I eventually wanted to travel to new places and discover new communities, and there was something very intriguing about the East Coast. It was mostly the music community that drew me here, and a crush and a desire to be near the ocean. And so it's been 10 years now that I've been calling Halifax home. Even though I've left a little bit here and there, I have been mostly rooted here for the past decade.
Wow. That's so interesting. So you started music when you were in Ottawa. Did you start writing music and performing then? And were you going by your name then as well? Or were you part of a band at the time?
I started writing music in 2008 under the name Gianna Lauren. Even though I had been in lessons for as long as I can remember, I started to find a voice and a creative outlet through writing music then, and was friends with a lot of musicians who encouraged and inspired me to get out there and perform. And I think it was the community aspect of it that really led me to pursue it further as well. And I got really interested in sounds and production and finding a way to express what I was hearing in my head on recording. And yeah, it was a really fun creative time.
Well, that's awesome. So today, I guess maybe since you moved to Halifax, your music is released on the label and management group Forward Music. And some of your label mates are Joshua Van Tassel, Paper Beat Scissors, the Olympic Symphonium. And you know, there's 8 of you in total, and then some alumni as well. And I feel like there's such a great sense of community, speaking about community, amongst that group. How did you start your relationship with Forward Music, and how has that evolved for you?
I'm so glad you brought this up, because another part of what brought me here is that group of folks involved with Forward, which originally started in New Brunswick 12 years ago now, and they eventually moved the company to Nova Scotia. I can't remember how long ago now, maybe 8 years ago now. need to fact check on that. But when I was living in Ottawa, the group Share reached out to me. And speaking of Forward alumni, they reached out to me about playing a show with them in Ottawa on the tour for Cher's Pedestrian album, which I still go back and listen to all the time. I love that album and Andrew Sisk's songs. And I had so much fun that night, and we really connected. And some of the folks seemed to really appreciate what I was working on at the time, and they really encouraged me to keep at it. And when it came time for the Gianna Lauren band to tour out east on my first album release in 2008, I reconnected with those folks, and it just kind of grew from there. And when I was officially landed in Halifax, and I had played my first show in April 2009 as a Haligonian resident, Daniel Ledwell was mixing the live show at the Company House there, and this was a show that I was playing with Andrew Sisk from Share, Share, not to be confused.
In case you want to look it up.
Yes. And Dan Ledwell asked me if I would, if I had any songs that I needed to record. And because he was getting started out as an engineer at that stage and trying to exercise some of those muscles. And so we recorded a lot of songs in his basement on Buddy Day Street when he used to live there. And so this is Daniel Ledwell, of course, of Jen Grant fame and in-flight safety history. And yes, so that was... And so around that time, Kyle Kunjak of Forward Music was helping me sort of make the connections and put it all together. And when they heard the album, they said they really wanted to put it out on Forward, and I've been with the team ever since.
Wow, that's awesome. It is a great group, and I feel that is Kyle, would you say he founded it and then he also runs it, the label and the management group? Like he would be the most senior person? Is that fair?
Kyle Kunjak is the owner and operator of Forward Music Group, which is the artist management company. But it was originally founded alongside James Boyle, who is now the executive director of the Halifax Pop Explosion, and Zach Atkinson, who is the owner/booker at the Capitol Complex in Fredericton, New Brunswick, which is where Forward was founded.
Okay, that's right. It's so fun. I love this about Halifax probably is you can kind of see the relationships and see how things have unfolded, and it helps you better understand those things, I guess. And so Zach now, it looks like maybe doing, focusing on Shivering Songs. And then are you doing events as well with Forward Music Group, or do you have a business role at all?
Yeah, so in addition to playing music and working in the arts, I wear some hats in event management and project management. And so it is something that was born out of a necessity to have a side gig, but also a passion to help people with their projects and their events, which is something that's very fulfilling and rewarding for me. And particularly with Forward, I have sort of dipped in and out of assisting them with various projects as needed. So, for instance, Joyful Talk is one of the artists on the Forward Music Group label, and I've helped them with some projects, particularly with Jay Crocker's art installation called Bibelo. So this was a new venture for Forward because they had an artist who also has an established art career. So I was sort of helping try and find places for that project to go and show. So that was really exciting. And I've also assisted with Joshua Van Tassel's book and soundtrack project called Crossworlds. And so that was another new exciting release for Forward, because Joshua Van Tassel and author Jordan Crute created this beautiful story, which they published as a book called Crossworlds, but Josh also composed and recorded a soundtrack to go with each chapter of the book. And so you listen to the soundtrack as you read the book, and it's a really cool experience. And so then all of a sudden Forward was in the book business, and then they were trying to find homes for this really cool multidisciplinary project. So I helped with that. But in addition to helping Forward, which is kind of as a need to basis, I also contribute to some local festivals. Obey Convention is an experimental music festival that I work on the team with in artist relations and helping with their hospitality. I'm currently working on the Halifax Independent Filmmakers Festival, organizing that festival, which is coming up. And there's a bunch of different other projects on the go, but those have been some of the main current ones.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's so neat. I love learning about projects that have multidisciplinary arts pieces. I just think that's so neat. You know, way early on, I really enjoyed when artists would work with visual designers and just do their artwork for their album, and then the photography. And then now with social media, we have so many opportunities to create graphics and share different videos. And then in real life, we can, people are really challenging. And I think this is something that you folks at Forward have done too, and yourself probably too, come up with really creative ways to have live performances, to invite people in for shows. I remember the showcase, the no cases, I should say, that used to go on, and they would be, in a little museum or a little store or something, and it just was a really neat way to present art. So I think that's really cool, and that seems to be a theme in like all of the things that you do, is presenting art in creative ways.
Well, thank you for noticing that. It is a mission of the group to really find these listening spaces and take shows out of bars when possible and really make the performance the main focus of why people are there. I have fond memories of doing those no cases outside of the official showcase list at the Music Nova Scotias and the East Coast Music Weeks, but we're not allowed to do those anymore.
Really?
Yeah, it was both festivals, unless we wanted to buy in to the festival programming. We were very strongly discouraged from putting those on again, which is a disservice to what we do as artists and the company, and not a very community-minded experience, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's too bad. I hope they do come back in some way.
Well, I see where those organizations are coming from. They're running a business, and they are trying to probably monopolize the audience to, keep everyone sort of under their hat. And so I understand where they are coming from. But for artists like us on the Forward label who do what we do, which is a little outside the mainstream and who are not selected for the official showcases, but who are worthy of performance space and time, it's a bit of a tricky situation, and it's hard to find opportunities for exposure to the music industry delegates that these organizations are flying in to check out the local music. So it, in some respects we do operate outside the mainstream, but we still do feel like part of the community, but sometimes it is like fighting to be part of the community.
Yeah, I agree. And then, so is it true that you're also doing grant writing for other artists and people and things? And so when did you start doing that more?
Yes, I have been doing some grant writing for folks in the music industry since I started in October 2018, so it's still fairly new. And even though, and that was more on an official, hiring basis, or that's when I was for the first time putting myself out there as this was a service that I could offer to people, even though I had been writing grants for myself or assisting organizations with their applications for the past few years.
Nice.
So it kind of came out of a way to make money. I guess I had just been laid off from a position that came quite as a surprise, and I was trying to. Oh, thank you. No, it all worked out.
Yeah, there you go. That's sometimes they do. Yeah.
And so I was trying to think of skills that I could put out there, and I was quite surprised by the response and the level of interest from other musicians or from folks who work in artist relations who are managing other musicians and artists that were looking for that kind of work. And, I think my rate was friendly, and so I started putting myself out there, and I have since then generated a few friendly clients. It's such a privilege to be able to help people with their projects and help them realize their potential through funding programs. But I have mixed feelings about this new quote unquote career that I've taken on writing grants with folks, because it was born out of a necessity, not because I see it as a fruitful thing. I actually have a hard time charging folks for my time, even though I know my time is valuable and I know that there's really important work that goes into writing grants. And even though I do really actually enjoy writing grants, which I know makes me a little bit strange, at least that's what other folks have told me. Yeah. But it's like playing roulette. And I always warn folks that grants are not guaranteed, and that even though I have history of getting this particular grant from this program, I can't promise that I can get you this grant. Do you still want me to spend the 5 to 10 hours and charge you for my time to write it? And, in some cases, folks might say no, or we might find a workaround. And, but in other cases, I am charging them for my time, and it is something that I have a little bit of anxiety about, even though I know it's a valuable service. And so something that I wish that we could do differently in regards to grants, because so much of the pressure is on the artist to get the money, which I think is important if you're at an emerging level, because it teaches you so much about the business, but it also takes away from the thing that the artist should be doing, which is focusing on making music and making the best possible music that they can make, because in a lot of cases, these folks don't have people writing grants for them. They're doing it themselves, and they're trying to figure it out themselves. So I would love to see these funding programs fund the venues, fund the promoters, fund the radio stations, fund the record stores. And instead of artists sitting there trying to get money to go on tour, trying to get enough money to pay for their meal, if this venue had the support to offer a satisfying guarantee to feed these people that are on the road who come in hot off the highway, or if, Nova Scotia could fund the recording studios, so they have, they don't have to charge as much to these younger artists, for instance.
Really
so I just sort of, maybe funding more the industry so artists can focus on being artists. And, I haven't fully thought this out yet, but, because I still think that there should be some degree of accountability or, but I do think it would be really interesting because venues have so much potential to do better or, spaces where people play music or make music. And maybe by them getting funding, maybe they can do those things better. Maybe if they had money to hire a promoter, then more audiences would hear about these events happening, and maybe audiences would be more likely to come out to something if it was properly promoted. I don't know. Maybe if we had all ages spaces in this place,
that would be
where
nice.
people to play, then maybe we would then be fostering and investing in our future. But all ages spaces that not, they need help too, because it's often younger folks running these spaces that are in school and, working on their lives too. So I think that some of these models for funding are very antiquated. And when I'm writing these grants for people, I see so much missed opportunity in where the money is and where the money goes.
Yeah. So my last question, can't believe the time just flew by, but we have talked a lot about community. So for you, what do you think goes into creating a really great community?
Folks need to feel welcome and that they can express themselves artistically and feel encouraged and feel like they can get feedback from people. And if they can feel inspired to push themselves to grow, and as an artist and as a human, then that is a very important aspect of community for me personally. And I think interdisciplinary work is important too. Because I think having our individual communities, respective to whatever field this community might, or sector this community might be
right. Do you mean like music
in,
or theater versus film communities?
So I think
different arts.
I think it's important for me to see a broader connectivity between the arts community as a whole, because I think, we as musicians talk to each other and we support each other, and maybe only within a certain genre, or maybe, because I recognize that I, come from a very specific sort of community, or, work with other artists who are of a specific community, or primarily, identify from a particular cultural group or whatnot. Okay, and so I think there's a lot of room to grow our respective communities and work better with one another. And I think that will involve some training on how to be a better ally for underrepresented groups who maybe aren't getting a lot of exposure, or are, their communities need help reaching next levels. And I'm speaking sort of very generally, but I think it's
good. I think it applies to a lot of groups. I do. Yeah. To a lot of different communities, that idea.
Well, yeah, I when I moved here from afar, it's because I thought that Nova Scotia and Halifax kind of had it going on in regards to the arts and the communities that I was attracted to being part of. But, Halifax is a transient place and people come and go all the time, and that changes our idea of community or what community means to us. At least it has for me. And so I think I'm really trying to put myself out there more to different kinds of arts communities and just trying to be, just trying to be out there more because I think it will really strengthen how we can be and how we can, I guess, live as artists here. And I think, there's a lot of potential in Halifax and Nova Scotia for the community to be a little bit more stabilized, I think, whether or not that comes from funding or looking out for one another in our respective communities and beyond. But I think it's an interesting time in Nova Scotia in particular, and there's a lot of room to grow and to help the arts here. Because I think Nova Scotia treats music as one of their like founding cornerstones, right? Like if you ever see a tourist ad for Nova Scotia, there's going to be someone with a fiddle, someone with an acoustic guitar, and Nova Scotia has this. I mean, do you feel that this way, that internationally Nova Scotia is known as like this music hub?
Yes, we have a sound. It's part of our culture.
Exactly.
For sure.
And so, but on the ground, sometimes I feel like there's a bit of a different story here. I know a lot of artists who are struggling because there are fewer places to play and the, guarantees haven't increased for live performance. There's a lack of funding for artists of various levels, and the cost of living is going up like crazy, and yet the cost, and so is the cost of doing business, and yet and the music industry is changing so much, but I don't think that it has changed enough to support this new era that we're in. And so I know a lot of folks who are who are working so hard, but the change is coming slow. And so I would love to see a little more action from the province, whether that is the community's culture and heritage, whether that is the municipalities, whether that means that we, stop building condos and start saving heritage properties or ban Airbnb so people have affordable places to live. I don't know. It can, I have a bunch of different ideas on how we can really strengthen the arts community here on a ground level, but also from a more administrative level. And I know I'm rambling and I'm sorry. But
no, that's really good. I mean, and I think that probably other communities see it too. I know we were just in Charlottetown for ECMA a couple weeks ago, and I had been talking to a woman who was working in a cafe, and she said that she made a remark about Airbnbs because I was staying in one. And she said, the Airbnbs have really forced out a lot of people who would love to live here, but people who own property, they don't want to rent out, for a year to someone. A lot of students sometimes, she said their experience was the landlord would break their lease when the summertime came because they wanted to Airbnb the apartment they were in. So yeah, I agree with you that the infrastructure needs to be there. I've talked to other artists, and I started out myself with in a place where there were 6 other people living there, and the rent was super cheap, but I had to keep my my expenses low because, like you said, it's really challenging to support yourself in the beginning when you're working in the arts, and the opportunities are limited. But I love that you came here and you have a number of communities that you're part of, like with radio. We didn't even get to talk about that, but that's been a big part of your career and in making music, and now your new endeavors to do events and work with the different people in the arts and funding. I think that's awesome. And I love your ideas about funding too. I think it's worth a second look. The Culture Action Plan from the province, I think, is brilliant. If we just did the things that are in the Culture Action Plan, like if our systems, were set up that way, right? Because it's such a beautiful document. Like, I love every theme, and I just feel like if we can all sort of, like, if we could come together and sort of walk in that general direction or believe in those things, that those what's in there is important. I think that could really go a long way. Thank you so much for your time. This has been such a joy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. It's really good.
We can chat more about grants and the fun and funding a
Me
little
too.
more.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad you caught that. Yeah, definitely can. We'll be sharing some resources. I know of a couple good programs I'll tell you about. That when I come across them, I'll be like, hey, what do you think about this?
Love that.
So there you go.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you like to listen to podcasts so you never miss a new episode of Granted. Produced by Krista Keough and John Mullane at John's Studio in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Follow us on social media. We are at Granted Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and you can follow us on Twitter at Granted_podcast.